I will start. First off, I want to congratulate and thank Jose Pereira. Did I say that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
For providing this presentation. Jose is a ACEP certified person. He's graduated from the bilingual software engineering degree and has a bilingual software engineering degree from UC3M. And he's authored a thesis applying the knowledge of centric engineering systems methodology in a practical case. He's been doing systems engineering for about 2.5 years, but has been very, very tool focused, if I will, that you've taught this thing and trained on, given presentations on this for a while. And I do want to say, this is the reuse company. He works for the reuse company. We're not endorsing the tool. What we're doing is providing a platform for him to discuss these basic interoperability issues between tools, because it is a problem in our business, and that he'll show some demonstrations on how that works and how those things can be overcome with the tools that are provided by reuse. Reuse has been very big in the COSI world, if you will, involved with a lot of the seminars here in Europe, and also have been to quite a few COSI events. So with that, I welcome Jose. And Jose, go ahead and provide the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you commented on, today I'm here not as part of the sales and consulting department. I'm more on my own experience, let's say, and I would like to discuss with you guys the problem that you just presented, that we have plenty different tools in the market right now, and we are facing a domain which is so complex in size and in complexity itself that it is impossible to just tackle everything with one tool, right? And as you need plenty different tools, then you cannot exclusively work on one of them. You need to have them orchestrated or coordinated in some sort of way, right? And that's the idea and the experience that I would like to share with you today, based upon, of course, the contact that I have with plenty different customers and prospects on this topic, right? So with that out of the way, I would like to start with the index. The first thing that I would like to present is a lightning round on the company itself, just mainly to introduce you guys to who the reuse company is, who am I as the presenter today, and why are we explaining, let's say, we are tackling this topic today, okay? The second topic is going to be the Interoperability Hub. Here you can fill any concept as you would like to describe this idea, but this is basically the theoretical part, the why we need, let's say, a sort of environment which coordinates everything, right? And then we will tackle the examples of potential interoperability activities. And as Mike shared with you, this is going to be on top of the SES, but this is something that I would like to discuss conceptually, and why is it important to perform it, let's say, in any way, right? And finally, I would like to, of course, have you share a little bit of your experience. What do you think on the topics that I will discuss later? But of course, as Mike has shared, my experience is surely or definitely shorter than yours, and I would benefit a lot from your feedback and to continue growing this idea that we are developing here. Okay. So the first thing that I would like to do is basically present the company, and we are basically a tool vendor, right? But the ideas that define us from the very beginning are semantic technologies and artificial intelligence. In the first days of our existence, we applied this to software engineering, but then we met some people within Airbus, within the company Airbus, and they just said, okay, these applications and this development that you're doing, you shouldn't apply to software. There's, let's say, more complicated and more scalable stuff out there, being systems engineering, this world or this domain, right? And we started applying this technology to systems engineering, and we've been doing so for over 15 to 20 years now. Okay. As the reuse company, let's say, has been growing on this field. it has been integrated more and more with INCOSE, right? And we try to, let's say, be present in all these events that Mike has mentioned, and try to, let's say, communicate with a lot of not only potential customers, but also, let's say, we would say partners in the tool vendor side of systems engineering, just to integrate everything and to try to once again grow this idea of interoperating, right? Speaking a little bit about myself, I'm an INCOSE ASAP, as Mike has mentioned. I certified myself at the beginning of this year, right? But I've been studying, let's say, yeah, sorry, is there any question? Okay. So I've been being taught by two certified members of INCOSE since the very beginning. One of them is Jose Fuentes, who's my, let's say, my direct leader in the team. And then we have also Juan Llorens, who's a star figure in all events, I would say. And he's one of the few ESEP, there's actually 4 in Spain. He's one of them. And of course, I've been like directly being taught by them on the different processes and how systems engineering as a whole and as a concept works, right? The final thing that I would like to highlight is that we, myself and a couple of colleagues, are main contributors for the latest version of the INCOSE Guide to Writing Requirements, which is one of the standards for the requirement specification that we have here. And of course, we are delighted to be contributing to this document and to keep giving more and more ideas to grow the writing section of this systems engineering domain. So the next thing that I would like to introduce is the main ideas that we are intrigued by and why we try to develop on those sites. The first one is the one that we're going to tackle in this presentation, which is the interoperability of, right? This idea that everything needs to be sort of connected and coordinated between each other. The next one is going to be enhanced technical management, basically trying to digitalize everything that we have on the technical management side, right? You can see here that, sorry, we have traceability, we have quality and VMV. Maybe VMV and quality are not by the book technical management, let's say, processes, but there's some processes within VMV, for instance, that we extrapolate or we try to tackle as technical management, right? And we try to digitalize those and improve the overall process within the lifecycle. Then smart requirements engineering, we apply here mainly those natural language processing and those artificial intelligence concepts to helping the requirements engineer specify requirements more structured in a better way, let's say with less fault. Because as you know, the earlier within the project, the earlier you commit with budget, you commit with costs and resources. So this specification is fundamental in, let's say, not wasting all those commitments in the long run, right? And facing later in the project exceedingly high costs to rewrite or reiterate what we have previously defined, like let's say, right? And then finally, the lifecycle management, how to incorporate all of this into a full and complete lifecycle for the system development. Okay, so basically mentioning this concept of interoperability needs to be, let's say, taken to reality, right? By integrating with the actual tools that are nowadays present in the market. You will recognize most of the names, if not all of the names here, because these are some of the key tools that we work with, right? And we try to work with them in order to, let's say, continue growing this idea of interoperability. For these standards, the main one to highlight is going to be the 15288, as it is the one mostly related to INCOSE, right? And we try to go by the book on these standards and try to help, let's say, projects and product development responsibles to keep tight with them, right? Or to comply with them, okay? And finally, as I mentioned before, we work with handbooks. In this case, I mentioned the INCOSE Guide to Writing Requirements, but the ones that you have here on the screen, the NASA one, the ECSS, are also part of our, let's say, repository of handbooks and guidelines that we can follow and help implement, right? So finally, for the introduction, these are the different domains we're using currently our technology, right? You can see aerospace and defense, energy, healthcare, and automotive as the main ones. you will notice here that we have a couple of names that are not direct customers, but are, let's say, people with whom we collaborate on developing these tools, right? And these concepts and this interoperability stuff, right? So also, there's no railway. Hopefully, we can introduce this idea and we can help, because we understand that systems engineering as a whole can be extended to any domain. And of course, the tailored parts and the specifics will be different, but the whole idea, the abstract idea, is the same, let's say, right? Very good. So I'd like to start with the theoretical part, the concept of the interoperability hub. Okay. So if we would have to, let's say, group the type of elements that we have into different sources, right? We'd say, or I would say, according to my experience, that you have technical requirements, right? The legal specifications, the requirements themselves usually come in this sort of textual format. Then we have the conceptual models, right? These conceptual models basically help you formalize these ideas, usually the textual ideas, but sometimes you can do the opposite operation, right? You can define your ideas in a more abstract way using conceptual models, and then you can extract or define the textual requirements from those, right? And finally, the physical models, which basically help you narrow down on which are going to be the specific elements that later will be existing on, let's say, the development of the construction, the building of this system itself, right?
Excuse me, Jose. Could somebody put their mic on mute, please? Mr. Richter? Oh, thank you very much. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So perfect. With these three ideas in mind, we can see that these are the three sources, and the amount of tools, these are just some of them, as you might know. I couldn't even fit, let's say, all the different tools that you have for each individual domain, let's say, even if I wanted to in this slide, right? And this is what we refer to, or what I would like to refer to as the authoritative source of truth, right? These are tools that are greatly designed for the specific purposes that they have been designed to, right? So Doors is great for managing the attributes, the views, the requirements themselves, right? And Cameo is a fantastic tool to define and design the different models that you have for different, phases of the project, right? So these are fantastic tools, and these are great tools, but they're dedicated to a specific objective, right? Or a specific task within the vast amount of different activities that you have to perform throughout the life cycle of a systems engineering project, right? So you need some sort of coordination between them and some sort of, let's say, standard ground or common ground to orchestrate the operations between them, right? There are operations like traceability, for instance, that are not individual to just one type of element. Doors, for instance, provides you with traceability between Doors elements. But what if I want to have my Cameo model traced against the elements inside Doors? And you have a problem. And of course, that problem can be solved with money, but we're trying to, let's say, go into the abstract and say, sort or try to find a better solution for all the different environments, right? One environment, let's say, to rule them all, we would say, if there's any Lord of the Rings fan out there. But just this idea that you're not trying to isolate anything, you're trying to, let's say, make everything connected and operate with each other. So this is the concept of the synchronized source of truth, right? All these authoritative sources of truth are wonderful individually for the task that they're been designed to, but they need a little bit of help in order to connect to, let's say, other places, right? Or other types of tools, right? Where you, let's say, develop another part of the life cycle, okay? So now I'll be basically describing some of the advantages, right, that you have from having a common environment, right? In this case, the first one is going to be you don't have one-to-one connections. And this is important because having one-to-one connection between all of these different tools could be great, right? Because you have a direct way of communicating, communicating two of them. But what happens if you have to communicate three of them? Then now you have to extend the capabilities once again. And the communication is going to go through any of these tools every time you want to perform an operation, right? So the concept of the synchronized source of truth would allow you to basically establish a connection for each and every one of them against this common environment, so that there's no direct communication between each other. You always have control of the data that is coming in and going out, and of the versions that you have coming in and coming out, let's say, right? You can track the changes, you can authorize and, let's say, prohibit some modifications on the different authoritative sources of truth, right? Depending on the permissions that you have, the roles that you have, so on and so forth, okay? Then the second point is going to be, you have different purposes combined, right? You might have data allocation, you might have document generation, you might have simulations, logical models, you might have PLMs or ALMs, you might have requirements management systems, and even software development tools, okay? All these different tools have different purposes, and trying to connect them is very difficult because some of them are not even prepared to handle different types of data, for instance, right? So having a common environment, once again, is an advantage because you can translate, let's say, these different sources and these different purposes into a common goal, right? And you can have everything coordinated and orchestrated from the same place. So for the third one is that these tools, as I said before, they're fantastic, they're dedicated, and they're great at what they do. There's a reason why most of us have purchased one license of Doors or one license of Cameo or one license of Polarion, right? Because they fulfill a role or a need that we want to have within our project, or that we have, within our project, right? But they're not cheap. They're highly tailored and highly dedicated to a particular task. Some of them even cover several tasks, but these several tasks are limited by the boundaries of the environment, right? You cannot go beyond it, is what I was mentioning. This is what I was mentioning before with the example of Doors, right? You're great. As long as you're within Doors, you're great. You're good. But if you want to go outside, then it's a little bit more complicated, okay? So we're not trying to replace here. The idea is trying to strive for a more coordinated environment in which you don't replace, or you do not throw away the tools that you already have, right? And the knowledge that your engineers already have by using Doors, Cameo, Capella, or whatever other tool, okay? This is the concept of the orchestrator that we're mentioning. Now, what happens if you, as you should, let's say you operate within the authoritative source of truth and you make changes? Well, we now have to face the impact of those changes, right? So you make a change, in this case, within, for instance, your enterprise architect, and then those changes will have an impact on the other sources, right? And this is something that you have to track. This is one of the difficult parts, right? But you have the possibility to do so if you have this common idea or this common environment, right? One of the main ways to do this is by tracing the different elements. As I mentioned before, having a common environment would allow you to connect even different types of sources, right? Requirements management systems with modeling tools, for instance. And then one impact, right? As you create or establish a trace between the different elements, one modification might impact the traces that you have established, right? So you make a change, in this case, in Cameo, and then the suspect traces are highlighted for all the different authoritative sources that you're connecting that element with, okay? That this way, you're always being notified. You always know the extent or the impact that the changes that you're performing in one source or in one particular task within the project development, how they're impacting the other ones, okay? And then the last one is going to be also working within this common environment. This common environment is going to be, let's say, it's not going to be as precise and as specific as the different authoritative sources, as it is not designed. The purpose of this environment is not to perform the individual task greatly, right? It's to coordinate all of them, as we were mentioning before. And therefore, the capabilities that you're going to have to change are going to be limited, but also needed in the sense that you need to be able to, for instance, revert to a previous version, save the changes from one tool to another, let's say, and all these changes, well, you must be able to perform them if you're working within a common environment, right? You do not want to be limited by, let's say, having to operate always in the authoritative source of truth, right? So now coming on to the more practical part, I'm going to highlight the 3 ideas, according to my experience, on interoperability activities that we can have, right? The first one is going to be moving or copying the word products. This is a very simple to understand concept, and it's basically no altering the nature of the element that you're dealing with, right? So this element is going to be moved, it's going to be merged. You're going to, let's say, append information at the end of another authoritative source of truth, but you're going to keep it the same. There's no modification. If it goes in as a textual element, it's going to go out as a textual element. The second one is going to be a little bit more complicated because you, of course, have to modify the nature of the element. This basically means that if you're putting in a requirement, a textual requirement, you can have as an output a model component, right? And this needs a little bit more deep understanding on how the input and how the output are built, right? You need to decompose, as we always talk about in the V model. You need to decompose this input and then recompose it as another type of output, right? And as the last one is going to be what we call a binding word product. And it's basically changes between 2 linked items. So you basically bind 2 items between each other. And when you make a modification on one particular aspect, right, that you can configure and you can tailor, because if you don't have control, can be quite dangerous. But you can configure this specific part. And if there's a modification on that part within a requirement or within a model component, then it's going to trigger a change on another place, right? On another connection or in another source. So for instance, you can modify a requirement, and then this modification of the requirement is going to flow down onto the next level, and it's going to alter the requirement accordingly, right? The requirements that are linked with it, okay? So for the first example, well, I see we have here a question. Yes, of course, from my side, there's no issue at all on sharing the presentation and the documents that I'll be showing today, okay? So the first practical example that we're going to take a look at is basically the moving or copying these different elements, these word products, okay? Let me just skip that right ahead, okay? Very good. So basically what we will be doing here is we're going to have two different sources, right? Imagine that you want to, for instance, you have a legislation document or an MS Word document, and you have information within this document, and you might want to move that information onto your standard working place, which might be, for instance, doors, okay? So as you can see here, this is an MS Word, right? And the only thing that's different is the ribbon up here and the right-hand side of the view, which is what we call the engineering view, okay? In this case, I don't want to focus on the tool itself. I want to focus on the concept. And we're basically trying to move this information from a Word document, which in this case, these are requirements, but it might be legislation statements that we want to take to doors, for instance, to a doors module, and then therefore operate within doors as we know better, let's say, right? Than to just operate without any sort of control of changes, any sort of versions, so on and so forth, right? And indoors, you can have your customization of views and attributes, okay? So that's why we want to move it from one place to another, okay? The idea would be to make this transformation or make this change or make this operation as simple as possible, right? And in this case, simply by choosing or picking on which side the source on which side the target is going to be, right? And simply pushing the information, executing an operation, right? And trying to copy everything. This includes all the attributes that you might have, right? Because attributes are a huge part of the requirement specification, right? And the requirements management processes. And this, of course, needs to have some sort of intelligence, right? We would like it to have some sort of intelligence. We don't want to just push and pull information. We want to be capable of defining if I want to bring information from somewhere, or I want to take information, from to somewhere. Okay, and this right-hand side, right? The action part is, for me, one of the most important concepts on this idea of interoperating, because you want to be able to create where you want to. And maybe if I don't want to have some of these specifications created, I must be able to select the option to preserve the information, not copy it to the other source. Okay. Very good. This operation must be, as I mentioned before, very simple and as quickly as possible, right? Because we want to operate fast. These are operations that you should be doing like not frequently. Something is periodically, like once in a while. Then you perform some changes in the authoritative source of truth. You come back to this common environment, right? And then you push the information, you synchronize the information, let's say, and you continue making changes on the authoritative source of truth, right? As you have seen, we have simply executed the activity, the interoperability activity. And then once it is executed, the information is copied onto the source. And now we save. And the idea is that all this information has been pushed back onto doors, right? And if we bring here the doors module with the temperature world requirements, you can see here that these requirements are equivalent to the ones that we had previously only within Word, right? So this is powerful in the sense that you can replicate information, and now you can work easily within doors, okay? Now, what happens, I will skip a little bit ahead. What happens if I start working on my specification now indoors, right? Because my requirements engineer work indoors, and they are going to modify the requirements. They're going to include new requirements, or they're going to delete some of the ones that I had, okay? In this case, what we can do basically is we can, in some sort of way, synchronize the information, right, back to the Word document, okay? So in this case, what we can do is open the same connection, right? Where we have here a connection to Word. So on this side, this is doors. This is Word. And on the left-hand side, we would have doors, okay? And now the information within doors has been updated, right? As you can see here, the state in the repository, let me bring it back a little bit. The state on the repository is updated. And for the last item is new. We need to track, this is very important. This is what we were mentioning before. You need to orchestrate and coordinate the new information and the updated information in this common environment, okay? Now, once we execute again the interoperability, we have saved all the information. But now what I want to do is synchronize back to my original source, which was MS Word, okay? And as you can see here, the action by default is going to be update the requirement, right? So this is where this intelligence that I was mentioning before comes into play. You're not just pushing and pulling, right, or appending only information. You can update, and the tool knows specifically where has been the change made. This is very important because if not, the concept or the idea of this common environment becomes a little bit complicated. Because if every time you make a change on the authoritative source of truth, you have problems coming back to the common ground, it's not going to be worth it for you to just work on this common ground. You're going to work as we have been doing up to now, right? Individually in each of one of the different tools, okay? So basically in this case, we're going to update the information and create a new item on the other side. Okay. Perfect. And once we execute, as I said before, this must be or should be as simple as it can. You can see here now that the state has been updated. And for the last one, it has been included. One detail also is the identifiers, right? This is something very important in the requirements management systems. You need to keep track with the identifiers, and you need to update them accordingly every time you include a new one or every time you remove, let's say, an older one, okay? Perfect. So we can see that we also have the save item in the source. You can see here the requirement that we have included previously indoors. You can see it now within MS Word. Okay. Very good. So I'll move on now to the transformation, right? This is one of the most interesting for me personally, because you basically alter the nature of the element that you're dealing with, right? Before we have seen that you can move requirements between two authoritative sources of truth, but a common ground, a common environment must also be able to help you in the process of generating, as I was mentioning before, you sometimes can generate models from the requirements or vice versa, right? This common environment is the common ground where you can make this translation between both sides, right? In this case, what we're going to do basically is these requirements that we have seen in the previous example inside MS Word are going to be transformed into a Cameo model, right? It's going to be a very basic Cameo model. It's going to provide me with a basic PVS and state diagram. But it's going to, let's say, set the ground or set the foundation for later accessing the Cameo, in this case, as the authoritative source of truth, and altering and including more and more information, right, with those bases. Okay. So in this case, we have the same as before. I have my Cameo, my connection to Cameo here, and my connection to MS Word with the requirements. And here you can see that my model is completely new, is completely empty, okay? And I want to generate, let's say, a baseline to proceed and to know, of course, this is also a matter of consistency, right? If I generate the model, the PVS, the product breakdown structure from the requirements themselves, I can be sure that the names and the names of the components and the names of the states are going to be consistent with the ones within the requirements, right? So in this case, it's the same process as before. You would define an activity, but as I mentioned, I don't want to get into too much detail on the process itself. Okay, here an interesting idea, or let's say an interesting part, which is the generation of traces, right? As I was mentioning before, not only for consistency, you can trace, or you must trace, the requirements from which you generate the model components with those model components, right? Because this, of course, if you modify the Cameo on the other side within the authoritative source of truth, if you modify this model, then you will be warned with a suspect trace, placing, let's say, the trace between this model component and this requirement from which it was derived as suspect, okay? Oh, sorry. Back in. Okay, around here. Perfect. So you basically can, let's say, see here this structure that I was mentioning before. You have the product breakdown structure with all the different elements. So in my case, my system, this is the thesis system that we were mentioning before. So it has, let's say, the temperature warrior as the entire system. And you can see within the temperature warrior all the different states here: validation mode, authentication mode, ready mode, combat mode, so on and so forth. Okay. This is state. This box here indicates also the state within the authoritative source of truth, right? The right one, the one that says now loaded, is within the common environment, but the left box, the color of the left box, indicates the status within the source, right? So here, before, it was updated for the basic elements that were already existing within Cameo, and green for all the others that are new. And we are going to include them by saving, let's say. This is what I was mentioning in the last point before, that you can make changes from the common ground or the common environment to those different authoritative sources of truth, right? So now within Cameo, we open it and we can see the product breakdown structure as well as the different states, okay? And we can even define the diagram and include the components, and the relationship between those components can also be translated, right? So if a requirement contains, let's say, from the ready mode, I go into, from the ready mode, I go into the combat mode, then this relationship can be also translated, right? This is quite powerful because you can, let's say, integrate everything and define everything in one go, right? With this translation. Okay. So this is for the transformation, sorry, the second point. And for the third one, we're going to be dealing with bindings, right? And for this example, I'm going to show you how, let's say, we can bind two elements. In this case, I have worked on my Cameo model, let's say, and I want to, let's say here on the left-hand side, this is my Cameo model. As you can see, it has been expanded. And I have more items and I have more elements. And I want to link a particular component. In this case, it's called control system. And I want to link it with the requirements that are associated to that component, right? So in this case, we're linking, once again, a modeling tool, right? So it's one purpose with another different one, which is the requirements management system, in this case, inside Excel, okay? And what I want to do is, every time I change, I want to make sure that I'm not inconsistent at any point in my development. So in order to do that, what I have to do, or what I will do, is bind this component with all the different requirements in my specification, so that every time I change, as you can see here, I'm modifying the name, right? And the last name that I define it is going to be propagated to this right-hand side, okay? Right, as you can see, I've changed the name, right? And only if I make a modification on the name on the left-hand side, this change is going to be triggered, okay? As you can see, all these different items have been updated, let's say, and even the placement can be different. So it's not a matter of, oh, well, the element or the work product is on the second place of the statement. No, it's more of a structure. This common environment must understand what it's being, let's say, in this case, output, right? What is the structure of the requirement that your output, that you have as an output in this process, okay? In this case, I'm going to show you a little bit how to define it. Let me just keep right ahead. And it's, once again, it must be very simple, because in this case, you have 25 or 20 something requirements, but in your specifications, you know better than I do, that you will have thousands of hundreds and thousands of requirements. And this is something that you must be able to do, let's say, consistently, without taking more time than it would a person to manually do this process, right? And to check manually each and every one of these items, right? So striving for a common environment is a wonderful idea, right? And this is something that we should work on. But of course, we need to leverage, if it takes more time to do it in a common focused way than to do it manually, then I think doing it manually is the way to go, at least for now, right? If at any point in time we improve this technology or any other technology in order to integrate everything more, then I think then we can make the change, right? But until then, I think if manually is the way that it works, the quickest and the easiest and the most in the most reliable way, then I think it should be the prime option. Okay. So in this case, it is very simple. We select the element. This is the item on the left-hand side, right? This is the content on the left-hand side. And here on the right-hand side, I select specifically, you see that we have a description and a header. So the title, I'm not going to select in that. I'm not going to be selecting that. I'm going to select the content of the requirement. And in this part is where the actual magic happens. And this is a pattern, what we call a pattern, but it is basically a structural template that allows you to identify the different blocks of the requirement itself, right? And in this way, this is how we can actually replace properly the name of the control system in the proper, let's say, slot. As you can see here, this is the pattern broken down into different blocks. And we're going to be selecting the one which says control system, because it's the one representing the item that we want to modify. Okay. This is a little bit complex, but this is the idea that I was mentioning before, in the sense of decomposing what goes in and recomposing it at the other end. Okay. And then once the binding has been completed, as you can see, everything has been updated. And the last thing I would like to show you as an example of important capabilities that you would need in this sort of common environment is the possibility to manage the different versions. And as you can see here, I have a current version. I have several versions here available for me. And one of the previous one, I replaced the name of the control system with a hidden system, right? And I should have the possibility to see them and to keep track of them within my common environment, as well as reverting to any previous, let's say, version, okay? So here's the possibility to do so. You select the option to revert. And as you can see here, the requirement has been modified to the previous version, okay? With this, I would, let's say, finish the practical as well as the theoretical part. And I would like now to know which are your points, which are your perspectives on this topic, and basically, which is your experience, which I'm sure that might differ in a lot of different ways with mine.
Thank you, Jose. Well, it's questions and answer time, and I hope everybody enjoyed that. There's a lot of good stuff there, and those who may experience that challenge, please jump in. Jose is ready to take your feedback and try to figure out what your experience is, right? So we can all learn.
I think we have a hand raised. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that was me. Excuse me. I'm Yoande. First of all, Jose, thank you for that presentation. That was actually really useful and really interesting. And every single project I've worked on, because I've worked on a lot of railway integration type projects, we fall into exactly that category where lots of people are using lots of different tools, and we end up with rather complex processes, and we're all depending on each other for data. And then you fall into this situation where configuration management can be a challenge because you're trying to make sure you have all the baselines correct. But there are two specific things that I would like to know your view on how we can manage. And one of them is, one of the reasons why we've got so many different tools is because of the expertise that already exists with those tools. So when we introduce something new, I think, and I'd like to hear what you think. I think that what we're asking for is some kind of upfront investment from a project or an organization so that they can configure it, train the right people or get the right people in. And how practical do you think that might be? And the second thing is, I've also found on projects sometimes, especially where we're doing more of the modeling using things like Enterprise Architect or Cameo, that sometimes the attributes we want, we don't necessarily have them nailed down at the very beginning. So we're sometimes modifying attributes throughout the project. So how adaptable to those kind of changes can this back-end process be?
Thank you very much for your comments. I think it's a great perspective that you have. Regarding the first topic, I think as you mentioned, this is a fantastic point. As I was mentioning, the cost, it's implied, right? Of course you would need this common environment. It's gonna be one more tool, as you mentioned, right? It's gonna be one more tool, and it's gonna be probably the most complex one, right? And I'm talking here from experience. It is not easy, let's say, to help understand each and every one of the different capabilities and the different possibilities that this common environment should or might have, right? But this idea or this concept that I was discussing today is, let's say, from my experience, right? The end goal, right? The objective to reach, right? For now, as you fantastically stated, it is a very high cost that you have to introduce to a team to just integrate everything, right? Into a company to integrate everything. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of tools involved. And of course, the investment in the expertise of each individual tool cannot go to waste, let's say, right? And it's gonna take, once again, a lot of time and a lot of investment to get someone on the level of expertise to be able to coordinate all these different tools, right? Because as you mentioned, you have a specific attributes in Cameo, or you have a specific attributes in other tools, and the coordinator should or must be aware of all these different details, right? If he or she is going to be, let's say, handling or more or less taking care of the common environment. So my perspective on this would be to now start off little by little, right? You would tailor, instead of having the extended common environment, just try to narrow down, okay, I have a gap between my requirements and my models. And I always struggle to translate my requirements into the models or the models into the requirements, right? Or I struggle to define my attributes throughout the life cycle, right? Having a common environment for this, I think it's very useful because it allows you to always have the version, as you mentioned, of the element along with the attributes, right? The attributes can also have different versions in this potential common environment, right? And this would allow you to just go through each and every one of them and know, okay, here in this previous version, we called this attribute like this, and it means this, and then now it has changed because this and that, right? So this is a very interesting point, right? And I think there's an expense there, and I would say start little, sorry, and try to extend progressively to the other tasks, right? Did I cover your first point properly?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was more of just, sharing my experience and hearing your point of view as well. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you. And regarding the second point, which I believe it is more focused on, let's say, could you detail a little bit more on which is your perspective on the second point? I think.
So you kind of touched on it as well when you talked about the attributes themselves might evolve, and you can effectively have a baseline set of attributes and then evolve that as you go through. Because the thing I guess I was trying to understand about your tool is whether it can accommodate attributes changing, or whether it's a back-end system that once you've built the attributes in and built all the traceability across the tools, if you were to add a new attribute to one of the tools, which is obviously new data that this integration point, which is your tool, doesn't know about, how does it accommodate that? But if you have some kind of versioning that allows you to evolve, then I suppose, yeah, I understand that then. Yeah.
Great. I will detail a little bit more in these, and it's basically we are currently the amount of tools and the extension of the potential to create different attributes, and not only attributes, but also different types of particles associated to the different word products. It's enormous. So we're currently working. This is not something that we are, I can tell you directly, this is something that we are now currently not capable of doing for each and every one of them. We have worked with a couple of them particularly, example doors, something. And basically, this is something that this is the overall objective, right? To be able to consider each and every particular detail and tailored option that you have within the authoritative source of truth, right? Because the common environment does not work, right? Or works heavily handicapped if you're not able to manage all the information that you have within the different authoritative sources of truth. And that's a fantastic point, right?
Yes.
So thank you very much for the question, right?
Thank you as well.
And I think we have another question. Yeah, another raised hand. Yanmin?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. This is a very wonderful idea. I think we're all experienced. I do have some specific question regarding configuration control. So maybe I missed it. You mentioned it. So if this tool is for collaboration for all project party to contributing, somebody make a change from one end of the tool. We normally have that QA/QC improving process, then publish it, then still, the project core team has to deconflict because somewhere else want to do differently than this one. So there's an arbitration process manual, right? So how do we introduce that process in your common thing? Otherwise, anybody publish something, it's directly override the other one without even checking. That's a concern.
Fantastic question. Yeah, that's a great point. Basically, the operation that I showed is because I have full permission, let's say, or full rights, right? In this common environment, one thing that it is crucial is handling and managing the different roles and the permissions that each role has, right? Because if anyone can make any change, as you mentioned, then tomorrow the name of the component is going to be X and the day after is going to be Y, right? And this is achieved, let's say, through something that we implement in the tool in this case, but conceptually, this is basically a change request. Like it's a gate that you have to go through. First, you have to meet the requirements in terms of permissions. So are you able to make a change request? Yes or no? If you're not able to make a change request, there's nothing to talk about. Then if you indeed are, then you're able to enter a specific mode that the common environment must have, which is a change request mode, what we call. And then there, you're able to make a change, which is not pushed, let's say, onto the final version. It's just sending, let's say, a request for review to an administrator or a person which is responsible or has the permissions to, as you mentioned, okay, authorize this is good or this is not good, right? So this is the idea, a change request. And in this particular case, if you're not able to make a modification or a change request for the binding, then until the point that the administrator authorizes or approves your change, then this modification on the component name in this case is not going to go through to the requirements, right?
So your tool has that configuration when people using for implementing the configuration control process in your tool and assign the privilege for that, right?
Exactly. This is something that, of course, we continue to work on, but for these common environments, I think this is something essential because you cannot orchestrate if anyone can play any instrument, let's say, right? So you need to have each and every one assigned to each position and say, okay, you can do this or you cannot do this, right?
Right.
Okay. Did I cover the question properly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It would be nice has a sample of the workflow for that, what it look like for different player, how go through that process.
Yeah, that's great idea. I think this is the most complex part because you have to take into consideration everything, right? And let's say connect with different users and make changes, which is something that, of course, you need to take into consideration. If you make several change requests for the same item at different times, but the first one has not been approved yet, then all of this must be taken into consideration. And of course, I think a use case showing all of this would be quite clarifying for this idea, right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, Mike, I think we also have one question,
done,
but
huh?
yeah,
Do we have any more?
Yeah, I think Walter has also, but I think this is more for you, and I think the answer is would be yes, right?
Oh, yes. In fact, I will put the link on where this shows up. Let's see if we can get it. Oop. There we go. Okay, so let me get the link, copy it, and put it in the chat. And so all our webinars are on this YouTube link. Let me put it on there. Okay, there you go. If you go there, you can, and this one will be posted soon. Dale, I guess you'll be doing the honors on that, or Hokie?
Yeah, probably Hokie.
Okay.
Also, the link is in the bottom of each flyer that we send out every month, so that you should have it hopefully access to it multiple ways.
That's right. There you go.
Hopefully you got the flyers. We are hoping we got our email list problems all sorted from about last June on.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Let's see. Again, those who want to do surveys, please put your email in the chat and we'll send you a survey. And I'll put that onto the email to Larry who does that, and you'll see a survey in your email box. Again, thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Jose, once again. Round of applause. And
has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And it was very good. I think a lot of people will be interested in this, of course. If there's I think you do webinars all the time. I've seen lots through the Reuse company, particularly with Word and Excel documents, how to drag those in and do special things with that kind of stuff, and other tool interoperability issues. If there's from the audience, if there's things that you want to see or would like to see, we can have Jose back.
Yeah, of course.
And
It will be a
talk
pleasure.
about different things. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just if you're interested in as you mentioned, we provide some sort of webinars, and we also have a smaller YouTube channel. So if you would like to see anything else, and contact me by the chat, then there's no issue at all, and I will be glad to discuss with you more onto this topic or any other topic that you might want to talk about.
Could you put your YouTube address in the chat?
Yep.
Okay,
I will put my let's see, my email, and then I can redirect you to.
Okay.
Or if you would like to directly go to onto YouTube, you can just search for the Reuse Company as it is here.
Oh, very good.
Then like this. Great.
Okay.
And you will find yourself there. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's 1:30, and we've had a great evening and great afternoon in America, and almost morning, I suppose, or it's noontime, 12:30 now in California.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.